Good morning. What were the option markets like in the late 80s and 90s before computers took over? That and a couple other things after the bell. Yep. Mm-hmm. I watched the special on Toby Keith last night on some channel. It was good. So it reminds me that I should have been a cowboy because that was his song. What a good tune. Anyway, good to see you boys.
About football, though.
What's up?
He was talking about football.
Yeah, you mean like a what do you call it? An Oklahoma State? No, he's there with a Pistol Pete's or something like that.
I was talking about Dallas.
Yeah. So today, Jason is going to be the take control. He's going to ask us a few things about the option markets in the late 80s, early 90s, and through the 90s. And then Mark's going to take the 2000s. And we're going to kind of take a look at how traders, market makers, how they existed back then versus how they exist now. We'll ultimately get there over the decades. Kind of interesting little tale. And we might get to a Reddit question at the end if we have some time. Sound good?
Yep.
All right.
Take care. So now that's my cue, right? Right, Lex?
That's your cue. You're now in control.
All right. So CBOE introduced options in the American markets, what, in 76?
73 or 72, I believe. Right around 73, give or take. Right, Mark?
Yeah, I just remember seeing that picture of all those market makers standing next to those old, Tandy computers, and they were all like in a line there, and they're standing up, and they took a picture, I guess, for posterity. But and I just kind of wonder, I've been trading options myself really since maybe 2010, 2011, and I've never lived in an era without computers. Mm-hmm. I've never lived in an era without skew or anything like that. And I just kind of wanted to know, what was it like, with your abacus, Lex? Like, how did you calculate all these Greeks and everything on the fly?
Yeah, so this is interesting because I stepped foot on the CBOE floor in 1986, the latter part of 1986, and then started actually trading in February of 87. I said 98, but I meant 80. 86, and then February of 87. Okay, I started. There's a big event that happened in 87. We'll talk about that in a second. But just for nostalgia, the CBOE listed options in 1973, April of 1973. Okay, and it was on April 26th. That day, with 16 listed stocks, okay, just call options, 911 contracts traded on all 16. That was it, total volume. Right, first month of April, first, I guess, full month, it was 20,000 option contracts for the first full month, which was a success in all the people's minds. They were hoping to get I think 5,000 or 7,000. They got 20.
I was going to say that's a lot more than I expected. Even that 911 is a bigger. I would have said 25 contracts traded.
Yep, 100%. But it's we know where this went and where we are now. I think this year's daily volume is in the 55 million range per day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then last year they did, according to Henry's Schwartz from SIBO, his breakdowns are always good. I think we did 10.3 billion last year, and I think we're pacing to do something like 12 or 13 billion this year. So it's a remarkable success story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So back to the original question. What was it like back then? So just so the viewers understand, the market making community today is very different from how I know it from when I started, right? Mark, do you remember how many market makers there were? Because there were individual people, not just firms back then. Does 10,000 sound like an adequate number, an accurate number, or was it bigger than that? across all exchanges.
Across all the exchanges? That doesn't sound crazy.
Okay. All right. So
I mean, there were several hundred in some of those big pits.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So let's call it 10,000, maybe 20,000. And a market maker then was someone like Mark and myself who had a office space on a trading floor, the width of our shoulders and the size of our feet. That was how we did it. And the pits were tiered, right? And there was a book behind the pit that the exchange ran. They had all the order flow back there, and there were independent brokers who ran around, and each pit had a stationed floor broker in it. That person was stationed there. So if someone wanted to send an order down, they would go through him. Now the orders came down physically, safe to say, at least when I started. So a runner would run in, drop the ticket off to the broker. He'd announce the market. We'd respond competitively. Whoever's first gets to take what he or she wanted of the whole order, and the rest was split up, pro rata after that. So for instance, if 100 lot came in and I was first, I'd probably take 20 to 30% just because I'm a jerk. So I'd take 20 or 25, depending on how good it was, and then we'd split it up. So
yeah, 100 lot now is like you would take it all, right? It's like a nothing compared to
yeah. Now it's different, right? But your original question is when there's no computers, then there really weren't computers. There were Quotrons and there were screens, and the screens look like that original Apple computer with a big fat back on it. And they're all hanging up in the ceiling, facing into the pit, and each one of those showed a different set of option markets on it. And there's n number of stocks in each pit too, and there's no consistency. Some pits had 10 stocks, some had 50. Just how it played out. And the busier stocks had bigger pits, and the lesser volume stocks had smaller pits because there were fewer people in it.
How did you determine who was first? You said if you were first, you would take 20%. Is it just who yelled the loudest, or
who was first to respond to the market? So the broker would have the ticket, the order, and the broker would come in and say, "OC 55s, how are they?" And you'd say 1 1/4. Whoever said 1 1/4 first, they'd say, the guy would say, "I'll sell them at 1. How many you want, Lex?" I'd say, "I'll take 20."
Okay.
Sometimes the smart ass brokers they'd look at you like after you said first, you look at it like, because they have a huge order, and they'd be like, "Yeah, how many, big guy?" Like, if you didn't give a number, he could sell them all to you. If you had 1,000, then you're going to wear them. So they could technically do that. Some of the jerks did that a little bit. I'm like, "All right, obviously you have a big order. How many you got?" He goes, 2,000 or something like that. All right, I'll take 200, something like that. So we played all kinds of games that way. Mark, anything to add from your time? Now, Mark got in there in 2005. I was there in 87, let's call it. So I lived through the whole open outcry part. No computers. We'll talk about that in a second. Mark, you are well into computer land by 2005, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were auto quoting and everything, but open outcry was still a big part of it. And I was going to comment on sort of what part of the order you want to take, right? That like even if you could do 100, you might not want to do 100 because you don't know what's coming behind it. Right. And you're much more better off if you're spreading that risk against a bunch of people instead of being the only one that's warehousing that. Now, there could be some advantages to that, but like at the end of the day, you're better off doing a good size chunk to get more edge. But you also want other participants to be, the market to be wearing that risk and to be ready to do more at the next level. So, it's more percentages than absolute numbers sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And don't forget too. So by the time you came, the computers were able to figure out skew. They were able to figure out call put parity, right? In 87, we were starting to get there. We did have puts. There were no puts in 1973. They didn't come until several years later. And then, traders didn't understand the relationship in synthetics of calls and puts and stock. And I told this story once before that one of the people I knew figured it out and figured out that if you did all these things and made conversions and reversals, you could lock in money. And the markets were so off that he was locking in money and no one knew about it. And, ultimately people quickly figured it out that there was an arbitrage there. And then once that happened, it started whacking everything back into line, but not before this guy took millions out of the pits as a result, right? And don't forget, we did not trade with each other very much in the pit. We were on our bids and on our offers, and it was public order flow, retail order flow, and institutional order flow that would trade with us. So it wouldn't be like Mark puts up a market 1 to a quarter, and I'm like, oh, I'll pay a quarter. I mean, rarely someone did that, but it wasn't often. It was probably more of a mispricing than anything else. And you could say, okay, fine, I'll sell you 5, you jerk, and then we'd move the market.
Yeah, it's not a great way to make friends in the pit.
No, you don't make friends that way in the pit.
Which, like, truth be told, you kind of need your friends in the pit, right? They're frenemies, right? You're competing with them, but like you're in it together.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing too is when I started, there was not multiple listing, which means that IBM only traded in Chicago. And then some of the other big name stocks, Chicago was the first exchange, had all the big stuff. It wasn't until I don't remember when multiple listing happened, but it was in the 90s probably is my guess.
It wasn't until the DOJ sued all the market makers and exchanges for collusion.
That's right. So then there's multiple listing, which means now that not only is IBM traded in Chicago, but it's traded on the Amex in New York, the P-Coast in San Francisco, and the Phillips. All markets were listed. So what does that mean in a non-computer world? Well, no market maker in Philadelphia wants to cross a market in Chicago, right? So the markets became very, kind of similar. You'd get an 1/8 or a 16th off a little bit, but not enough to do anything, right? And what would happen is that if you had an order to sell in Chicago and IBM that was listed elsewhere, the broker would come in and say, "Hey, I have these to sell at 1 1/8." And the reason I'm saying 1/8 is I was in fractions, not decimals. And we'd say, "No, we're one bid." And he'd go, "Well, they're 1 1/8 bid on Phillips. Do you want to match them, or I'm sending the order there?" Well, what do you do, right? Yeah, Mark, what would you do in that situation? You want to keep your order flow in Chicago or in Amex, wherever you are. So you'd say, "Okay, I will pay 1 1/8, fine." Sometimes it was a ridiculous price and across theoretical value. We'd say take them out there, or we'd hit them out in the Phillips or P-Coast to kind of move the market, right? So
yeah. So I mean, were you constantly on the phone then to try to see like what the quotes were, or was it on your little Quototron, or
we could see
what quotes were in other markets?
We could see that on the Quotrons, where other markets were and what exchange had them. We would just send an order out there. I wouldn't really get on the phones. As time went on, later in the 90s, mid 90s, we had a ability to call the pit and say, "Hey, we got these out here. Are you going to trade them there? Yes or no?" "Oh, no, we're not." "Are you really bid?" "Yeah." "Send them out," or we just trade them. We'd match it. Just depends. But think about
electronic markets weren't even held then.
No,
you could send an order down to the Phillips and be like, "I'm selling your 1 1/8 bid," and they'd just be like, "No, sorry, we moved." The orders would come into the pit, and you could move your market. Like, you weren't held to electronic markets.
That's right. So very different, very, very manual. And then, your original question without computers, I didn't have a small handheld computer at first. So that all of a sudden becomes interesting because if you're trading a lot, you have to keep track of your deltas. That was the number one thing you kept track of. It was pretty hard to figure out what your gamma was. You knew whether you were long or short, but exactly where you were was pretty tough. That took another bit of scribbling on the back of an envelope.
Yeah, well, that was my next question is manually, how do you trade through your Greeks? Like, how do you know what you obviously know what your book looks like from a overhead standpoint, but you're sitting there with your abacus,
pretty much.
You're doing your gamma and you're like, do you even pay attention to Vegas and thetas, or like?
No, not really. Not until you got your sheets the next morning, or you could go up in front of a computer and try to put it in. And for me, what I used to do is we had clerks, so we had a clerk, stand behind, and he kept track of my deltas, and he'd be like, "Your 2,000 line." I'd say, "Sell 2,000 shares." Right? He goes, "Where?" I go, "I don't know, just figure it out. So get a good price." So we'd sell 2,000 shares. I go, "What am I now?" "Okay, you're delta neutral." And then if I buy some puts, buy some calls, they net up my head. I bought puts, bought calls, they net out more or less close enough. I buy a lot of calls, okay, I'm getting long now, right? Sell 2,000 shares. I'm guessing a little bit until I can really run a pencil and paper and a calculator through it. So that lasted through 87, probably to 92-ish for us, maybe 91, doing it by hand. And then we introduced in our firm early on in the early 90s, 93, we had a little bitty Hewlett-Packard fold-out thing, dot matrix. I mean, today looking at it, people would be like, "Oh my God, is that a Model T?" and it was a Model T. But we had Black-Scholes piped into it. We had the option model. Then what that gave us was the ability to give theoretical values on a little bitty computer. So now all of a sudden we take a quantum leap with theoretical values. All of our deltas, once they were input, and our gamma, theta, vega, rho, all of a sudden was there, manually inputted. So if I was busy and flipping cards over my head to my clerks, they had to sit there physically and type these in. And I'm yelling at them, where am I? Where am I? Where? And the only thing I really care about is delta at first. And ultimately say, hold on, I'm almost there. And then boom, they give me a number, right? So it was like a abacus for sure. Sticks and stones, man. Right? Mark, any input here on this stuff? It's crazy, right?
It's wild. I mean, like, I obviously wasn't there, but the reason the firm I worked for was founded was because a bunch of independent market makers needed to like get together and hire a computer programmer to start managing some of this stuff. And that's why you band up. It's like, dude, we need to get some computers. What we would run to keep track of it, I mean, this was very tail end of it when I joined, but we called them like strips, where you had the theoretical value across a bunch of different price points and your Greeks across a bunch of different price points.
Right.
So like the computer would spit out and you'd say, okay, stock's up $1. Now my position looks roughly like this. Stock's down $1. Now it looks roughly like this. And so you just have like a matrix of the scenarios of where your position evolved.
Mark's environment looks a lot more sane than Lex.
Oh, God. Yeah. So those were called sheets back in the day, right? So we all had sheets, strips, or whatever you want to call it. And what we'd also do is we didn't have that at first, but we did finally get there. And we'd run the sheets, like Mark said, up and down, whatever it was. It depended on your stock. If stock moved a lot, you had to run a lot, right? If you didn't move a lot, you could run $1 up, $1 down, be safe. But what we also did is we ran volatility, implied volatility up with a set of sheets, and we ran implied volatility down with a set of sheets. So we have implied volatility levels that gave you new values. And if implied vol went down, we pull out that set of sheets and start using those. Because obviously, Jason, as you know, all of a sudden we're dealing with Vana that we didn't even know existed, right? So we didn't know what that word was. And charm, we didn't know what that word was either back then. Yeah. So we're doing it just manually with sheets based on where implied vol's going. We're vol's up, take these out. Give me the higher vols, So then we do that. But don't forget, it's changing as you're trading. So you've got a baseline of your Greeks, and it's changing as you're trading. So you're kind of
So what were your bid-ask spreads? On like you said you're an IBM, like percentage wise, what would be your bid-ask spreads around, say, like an at the money call or bid or put or whatever?
It depends. So, and here's another little tidbit. I quoted options in fractions. Mark was there in decimals. Okay.
Yeah.
So I went through fractions and all through fractions. And then we went to sixteenths, which everyone was pissed about because it narrowed the market. And we're like, what the hell? This sucks. No sixteenths. With back in fraction day in single list was wide. A retail person today has no idea what has happened in the marketplace relative to computers and competition and how it's become democratized and liquidity is unreal. It was not like that in the 80s and early 90s.
It wasn't even like that in 2008. This is a very recent phenomenon.
Yeah. We had legal wits we had to abide by. So options, I forget what they were, to be honest, but options under $1 had to be 50 cents wide. Okay. $1.01 to or $1.16 to whatever, $3 had to be, 25 cents wide. Again, I'm making those numbers up a little bit, but something like that. So guess what the markets were? As wide as they could be. Yeah. Right. And if you wanted to trade in between, a broker would come in and say, how are these? I'd be like 3 to 1/2. Right. And I'm like, I hope this guy pays 3 1/2. You don't realize how much money that is edgewise. And I hope it's like I get 100 of these. Right. So, and Mark, I don't know if you remember, but when he paid 3 to 1/2, my market coming out is now 325 to 375, depending, maybe 20, 60, I don't know, somewhere in that ballpark, depending on what happens. And inevitably someone would come in and I got these at 320. Well, I just made 30 cents on these. That's a lot in option speak, right? Depending on how many I did.
Oh, on 100 lot, go home for the day.
Yeah, you're done. $3,000, or is it more? It's a lot. Yeah.
So
Yeah, and don't even mention when we had relief from bid-ask spread in fast-moving markets, like when Chrysler was taking over, we could be whatever we wanted, basically.
Yeah.
So I was, so, and they just stood by me the whole time. It was so busy. They said, Lex, I need a market. What are these? I've got 1,000 to buy. I go, you got to buy 1,000 for me, 3.5. He goes, I'll pay $5. I'm like, sold. I'm like, next guy comes in. Where are these? I'm like, 4.7. I got these to go at 4. I'm like, holy shit! I just made $1 on 1,000 lot. Right? That's how crazy.
That you actually probably go home for.
Yeah,
I stayed because I was down a lot more than that. The gap opening in Chrysler, I was down 6 figures that day, man. A big.
But that's the reason, like the bid and ask spread had to be that wide, because you were manually calculating this,
right.
because you had to like sloppily manage your deltas, like you were giving up edge left and right, like not knowing what was going on. You had to price it that way.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And look, it was
I
all.
cannot imagine flying blind like that. Like, how did you make money ever?
Yeah, it was insane. It was. But
So-
then, as the 90s kind of, kicked in. So I lived through the 87 crash, and 92 was a crash too. No, a lot of people don't talk about that. That was when United Airlines almost went belly up. So that was a big move. And we get to the mid 90s, and all of a sudden things start getting computerized. We have auto quote, and then we have multiple lists. And now all of a sudden we're not physically making markets in all the deep in the money options, right? We had to open every market every morning, all of them, the deep calls, the deep puts, and we just say, okay, Jason, you do the deeps in October, and I'll do the deeps in November, and Mark, you do the deeps in December, and you're just reading on your sheets and just making a market. There's the quote machine's putting them up. The guy's physically typing these in, right? Well, that went away. It became computerized, and then we could move markets, still verbally, but quote reporters. So then the quote reporters went away, and everything was on your computer. So that became hybrid, and now all the markets were disseminated from a computer, from a human in a pit. And then we started getting chairs in the pits and little posts to put your computer on. That didn't exist in the early days either. So
in October 19th, 1987, which I remember just because it's my wife's birthday, but my wife's first birthday. But on that day, you're in manual land using your abacus. You are apparently less than a year experienced.
8 months to be exact.
8 months experience. And
no idea what I'm doing.
Right. Your clerk behind you is laughing at you, right?
Yeah. So is the broker. And virtually everyone in my pit left. Seriously.
Right. So
it was so unbelievably terrifying. Okay. No one's ever seen this. And don't forget, the market was down, 400 points? Was that it, Mark?
that went down like 23%, right?
Yeah. So, and we were only at like 1,200, let's call it, or I think in the Dow, if I remember correctly, thereabouts. So it wasn't like a big actual number, it was a big percentage number, but we didn't have that kind of move ever. And this was terrifying. So there were people who blew out, and all that means is that, they sold so much premium, they didn't have wings, and stock, gapped down, they're out of money, they're done. So they're not down in the pit, they're upstairs. And I was a new guy, and I only learned long gamma and buying things at that point. So I got so lucky. I told my dad, I'm like, I think I made a lot of money on this. I'm not sure, because I was looking at two numbers on what it could be. And it was, I can say I'm 24 years old then or something like that. I'm like, it was a 6-figure number for me at 24. I'm like, this is pretty cool. Not knowing what I'm doing after I've already blown 50 grand of my backers' money. So it turned out to be pretty good. Still no idea what I'm doing, but I didn't leave. And that's how I got in good graces with the broker in my pit. And he was a terrifying man. He was frightening. I was scared to death of him. And he pulled me aside. He says, I'll never forget what you did for me. You didn't leave. You didn't quit. And you stayed down here when everyone else left. I'm going to take care of you. Is what he said.
Did you stay out of ignorance, or did you stay?
100%. Totally ignorant. Totally out of stupidity, not knowing anything. And he'd say, Lex, I need a market. I don't care what it is. Just give me one. And guess what they were doing then? Just buying puts. Every order was a put buy.
Everybody buying puts, right?
That's all they did. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm selling puts. And what am I doing, Mr. Gamma Man? I'm selling stock.
Yeah.
And it's like a downside spiral opposite GME. GameStop to the downside, and all of a sudden, a normal smile skew, which was symmetrical, becomes skewed to the put. And that's the start in 87 when market makers figured out that, whoa, these downside moves are crazy and velocity is huge. We're going to price these puts a little bit higher than those out of the money calls. And all of a sudden, normalized skew was skewed instead of, smile.
So that was after October 19th then, right?
Yeah. So after 87, things started just theoretically looking like a skew, especially in indices. Indices were skewed the other way because the market only went up. And customers just buying calls and just saying, "Oh, I'm just gonna make money if I buy a call." So we skewed it the other way, but not after 87. Everything kind of to what we know today in terms of skew. So
cool. So I guess Mark, how would it have been different in your time? Like if market sold off? I mean, we had the flash crash. Were you around for the flash crash or?
I was.
What was that like?
That was probably more terrifying than 87 to me. That looked like the world was coming to an end, in my opinion.
The flash crash?
Well, is that the 08 one or is that another one?
No, he's talking about the flash crash was like 2012.
Right. Okay.
That the market just ripped down.
Yeah, I remember that.
We were just all looking at each other like we're scooping deltas, right? Like nothing happened, right? There's no bomb. There's no buy. So that was a great day.
Yeah. The 08 was terrifying too. That's the one I'm talking about. That was one where
was terrifying because every single day it just got worse.
It was
ripped the other way, and it just got worse.
It just was terrible. And then the other terrifying one too, and we'll have to do another show on this one, is 9/11, 2001.
Oh.
I was on the phone with New York in our conference room. This is when we had our big firm. And I could hear the planes hitting the building. We'll tell that story on another time because we're running out of time. But I said to the guy in New York, I said, "What was that?" Because we were down in, downtown, our offices, and they were pretty close to the World Trade Centers. And he looked out the window, and goes, "I don't know, something's burning down the street," kind of thing. I'm like,
wow. The Amex, the old Amex building was right there.
Right there. So we'll hit that up on another Tales from the Past show. So this was good. This was fun. We got to run. Didn't get to our question, but we'll get to that next time. Any last comments, Mark, before we go? This is fun. I always love reliving this, and it's neat to tell folks in today's world who, a lot of retail folks are just hitting buttons on a computer, which is how it grew, how it matured, and it made life for a retail person great.
Yeah.
I feel like we got the 20th century history going. We should do the 21st century next week.
All right, we'll do
from 2001 on.
Yeah, perfect. I find it absolutely fascinating to hear these kind of stories and what it's like, actually down in the pit, and because then it brings it to life, and market makers are, well, now not so much, but humans, and and it's it kind of
it's a good point. And just one last little piece of data. Mark and I said there were probably about 10,000 back then. It could be 20. I mean, it's a big number back then. There are 12 to 14 market-making entities left in listed options. There are more exchanges than there are market-making firms. Think about that. That's how much technology consolidated that industry.
Yeah.
Right? It really did.
Top five probably do 60 to 70% of the volume.
Easily.
If not more. Yeah.
It's more than that, I think. I read somewhere it's like 85% for like Susquehanna, Jane Street, Citadel, all those. I think they're like at 85%.
Yep, for sure. So we'll get into the 21st century on another show. That's great. That was a good topic today, guys. Appreciate it. Anything else? Okay, Jason, plug. Let's get a plug before we leave.
www.vol.land for option dealer positioning dashboard.
Perfect. Mark?
Harvestedfinancial.com, where you can find all my fascinating writing. Today I'm doing a blog about execution quality and how to pick a good price before you get a fill. And you can learn all about the bots and option stuff I do over there.
Perfect. I was looking at execution quality the other day. Someone asked me about it, so I'll be reading. That's awesome. I'm Lex. Email me at lex@tradier.com. TRADIER. We do all kinds of demos and get-togethers online, so we can talk options and do demos of anything you want. And then visit us at hub.tradier.com, where you can subscribe for free and get more great things there. We'll see you every Thursday, 9 a.m. Central Time. And you guys have a great rest of the week. And Mark, what else?
Happy trading.
Happy trading. Have a good one, guys.
You know how the financial world goes. Here comes the buzzkill. Please make sure to take some time to read this boring disclaimer. We will owe you one.